Good evening. I'm Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS Conversations with Selwyn. Those of you who are joining us for the first time, a very special thank you. CWS is about having conversations with people about their journey and how they are using their gifts and talents to help others. How are they making a positive contribution to humanity? At times, we make positive contributions without even realizing it. We do positive things by giving unconditionally, giving beyond, without needing to know where our gifts going to end up, giving without expectation. And I believe those forms of giving best defines us as human beings. And so I'm always looking for people who are doing extraordinary things, are doing things extraordinarily well. And I call this conversations because I do not like the rigidity of an interview. I think conversation allows for some amount of intimacy. I think through a conversation we share. And I encourage people to share their stories, not just to glorify their successes, but to share with the rest of us how they overcome or how they might have overcome some of their challenges, how often they got up when they fell, because I believe that there is no success without challenges. No one rise without falling. It is just the way life is. It's just the way everything works. I always talk about the rhythm of the heart rate, the waves on the river or the ocean, a musical score. There's ups and downs, and our lives are filled with ups and downs. And I think it is important that we embrace our downs as much as we embrace our ups, because somewhere in between is where God's grace is. And with that, I'm often encouraging people to commit to their ideas, to pursue success, not for the glory of it. Nothing is wrong with that. I think you've earned it, so fine. But because our successes really do not belong to us as individuals, but it belongs to us as a collective. I see a success as a beacon of light that shines upon us, that illuminates paths and help others to realize that they too can shine, but more importantly, perhaps shine on them and help them to see where their switches are. Commit to your idea. An idea comes, and sometimes it comes in a very raw form. It comes in a way that you share it with your friends and they will laugh you, they will mock you. But imagine tonight, this medium through which we are communicating. Imagine this is an amalgamation of various technologies, but could you imagine if one of those persons would have doubted themselves, would have said, no, I can't do this, it's silly. Internet, are you crazy? Webcam, are you mad? What is that? But they didn't. And as a result, here we are tonight. So remember, your idea is not just for you. And I hope in some way by understanding that and believing that, you will find it within yourself to pursue your ideas, knowing that one day it may help someone or millions. And before I take a break, I want to say one thing, how important it is for us to share our stories. I like to imagine a young person somewhere in the world dealing with all sorts of challenges and limitations. Some imagined, some their own doing, and some because those close to them are saying to them they can't. You can't, you shouldn't, and you shouldn't even try. Now imagine you sharing a challenge that you overcame and how you did it. And that sharing evokes something in that young person who transforms and one day becomes a geneticist or an oncologist or a head of state, or someone who stops a genocide, someone who discovers a vaccine that saves millions. We do not know, we cannot know. And that's where our grace comes in, is to give without needing to know the extent of our gifts. And I want to leave you with this when it comes to just underscore this point. Imagine some of our leaders like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and one we just lost, Nelson Mandela. Imagine if they had given up. Imagine if they needed to be around before they make necessary sacrifice. Thank God for many of us. They were not like that. So, I will take a break, and when I return, I'll introduce you to Dr. Marta Effinger-Crichlow. I am back, and those of you who are tuning in for the first time, I'm Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS Conversations with Selwyn. The lovely lady next to me is Dr. Marta Effinger-Crichlow. Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here and humbled by this.
Well, I am
Thank
happy
you.
to have you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to just read some things about you
Okay.
because and not give away too much.
All right.
I don't know how I'm going to manage that, but let's try this. Marta Effinger-Crichlow is chair and associate professor of theater and literature in the African American Studies Department at New York City College of Technology, NYCCT's CUNY. She received her interdisciplinary PhD in theater and drama from Northwestern University and her MA in African American Studies from Yale University. Her research and teaching interests are on Black women's literary and dramatic narratives, as well as African American migration experiences. Her book, Staging Migrations Toward an American West, from Ida B. Wells to Rodessa Jones, is scheduled for publication with University Press of Colorado in June 2014. Her writings are included in African American Lives, Theater Journal, African American Review, Footsteps, Children's Magazine, Journal of Black Studies, and the Dictionary of Literary Biography. She has also been an invited lecturer of Xiamen University in Xiamen, China. Xiamen, right? Xiamen, China, where she presented the blues narratives in African American theater. Dr. Effinger-Crichlow, who received her BA in Black Studies and English Writing from the University of Pittsburgh, is also a dramaturg and playwright. Her dramaturgy credits include Sinclair College in Dayton, Ohio, the ETA Creative Arts Foundation, the Goodman Theater and Unks Theater Ensemble in Chicago, Passage Theater in Trenton, Kuntu Repertory Theater in Pittsburgh, and St. Paul Community Baptist Churches, the MAAFA in Brooklyn. I want to stop there just because we have a packed night, right? Okay. And I always imagine my guests as gems with many facets.
Okay.
And what I hope happens by the end of the conversation is that we twist the gems a little bit so we can expose the various facets.
That sounds great.
Sound good?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So, well, first of all, congratulations on being one of the 25 influential Black women being honored tomorrow by the Network Journal.
Yes.
This journal is New York premier magazine for Black professionals and business owners. Mm-hmm. Were you surprised? And what does it feel like to be part of such a select group of Black women?
Totally surprised and, again, honored. And I want to thank the Network Journal for making this connection. Really honored and humbled again by it all. I think it's a way to celebrate women in the community, but I must acknowledge the fact that I am sure there are millions of women in this country who are doing just as much as I am. And so I'm humbled. It reminds you that Your work is never finished, and people are watching you. And even when you don't think they're inspired by your work, they are inspired by it. And so it reminds me that my journey is not over, it's just beginning. So I think it's exciting to be among other women who are doing some amazing things around the country, not just in New York, but around the country. So I'm really humbled, and I was certainly surprised. I was like, "Are you sure?" But I'm honored. I'm honored, and I'm excited about tomorrow. I'm really excited about meeting the other women and celebrating their accomplishments.
Wonderful. And what an event, especially this month being
Women's History
Women's
Month.
History Month.
Yes, yes.
If you were to eavesdrop your family having a conversation or a discussion or telling a group of people stories about you,
Okay.
what do you think your children would be saying, and then your husband?
Wow. Well, I have a daughter, one daughter,
Okay.
Grace, and she's amazing. And she's 5. So,
Hi, Grace.
hello, Grace. She gets to stay up to listen to us. And my husband has already told a number of people on Facebook. So, um, I read his message tonight, and he simply said that I deserve this. And, I don't know if I deserve it, but I'm excited that he has always stood by me with all of my work and my accomplishments. And so we're a team, the three of us, Grace and my husband and I. My husband, Roger, who's a musician and music teacher. We are a team, and I think that whatever I accomplish, they accomplish. And
Wonderful.
the
Wonderful.
same for the two of them. I know my daughter would say to her friends, "Mommy's in a magazine," and "Mommy's in a magazine." So her joy fills me up, and it reminds me again, as I said before, that my journey isn't over. And so, yeah, they try to remind me that I should celebrate moments like this, and they bring family members and friends into the moment, and I thank them for that, because I'm not too good at that. They would tell everyone, and they have told everyone, "Mommy's in a magazine," or "Marta is among a wonderful group of women." And so, yeah.
Talking about your 5-year-old makes me want to ask you this, and if you don't mind,
Okay.
where were you born and raised, and what was it like growing up there as a child, and what distinct sounds do you remember?
Well, I grew up in Washington, D.C. You can probably hear the accent. I grew up in Washington, D.C. in the 70s. It was Chocolate City back then. That's another discussion now. But I grew up in a household filled with extended family members. I was raised by my mother and her twin sister. And my grandparents, Martha Carter and Herman Carter, who have passed away. But I was raised in a family with my older brother and sister, and cousins and aunts and uncles surrounding us. And back then I thought I didn't have any privacy. Not a single moment to myself, because there were so many of us gathered together on a daily basis, or for holidays. But as I got older, I appreciated that extended family, because I had so many people looking out for me. I always say that I have more than one mother, because of my aunt being there and my grandmother being there. And I really believe they shaped who I am. I mean, early on, I know that they, instilled in us having a strong work ethic. Integrity was really important. My family went to D.C. in the 1950s as part of that migration. And so I know they shaped my interest in migration. But as a child, I just remember discipline was important. and having a strong work ethic and having a strong faith in God was really important in that household. And
What kind of music did you grow up with, and has any of them made it to your playlist today?
yes, they have. They have. My grandmother used to hum Precious Lord when she was upset or when she was quiet in the kitchen. And when she was humming, that could be a good thing or a bad thing, but she was always humming something like Precious Lord. And I remember WYCB radio in Washington, D.C., they would play that constantly. And so I would hear individuals like Shirley Caesar on the radio or James Cleveland or certainly Aretha Franklin's Amazing Grace. And so I heard those sounds, but I also had older cousins and they would play the R&B, and I would hear Minnie Riperton or Ray Goodman and Brown, individuals like that. So I had a mix. I was certainly listening to the gospel music of that time, but I was also hearing the sounds of R&B, and certainly we didn't have cable. So, listening or watching Soul Train on Saturday mornings, I learned how to dance from Soul Train and from my cousin. So I remember those moments. And I remember my grandmother was an amazing cook. And my aunt and my mother were also amazing at it. But my grandmother had a touch. And so I remember on Friday night, she would cook fish. I remember that, and spaghetti. On Friday nights, and there was a corner store maybe a few blocks away, Mr. Al's corner store, and we would go there to get some of the items. You didn't go to the large grocery store for some of these things, but I remember those smells and those sounds. When I was in kindergarten, for a year, I think I attended the neighborhood school, and my mother was a nurse at the time. She would work at nights, but she would watch us come across the street in the upstairs window. And I remember around 3 o'clock, Oh Happy Day, always played on the radio. And so several years later, every time I hear that song, I remember my mother watching me
Wonderful.
walk home.
Did you enjoy school as a child, and what was your favorite subject?
Oh my goodness. I loved school. And I remember that I loved English and writing, and I loved the music. I loved music classes, but I certainly loved English classes. And yes, I was a goody two-shoes. I was the student that uh, would always do the homework assignments and make others angry with me. But I remember those times.
I'm spending a little time on your early timeline because
Okay.
I want to examine this facet and then
All right.
we'll move on. Can you give us a glimpse into the life of the 7-year-old Marta?
Oh gosh.
What was she like at 16 and
16?
Yes, and who did
Okay.
she become at 24?
Oh wow, 24. All right, you're taking me back now.
Yeah.
Um, as I said before, I had an older sister and a brother, and I followed my sister around like a little rag doll. I did, and in a way, it was what she said.
Oh, okay.
It was like, yes, all the good, bad, whatever. And just looking back, I wanted to be like her. She's a couple of years older than me, and she's an amazing nurse in Washington D.C. now. And I remember my brother. He's really calm, and he's 4 years old, and he was always reading books. And I don't know if I could read at 6 years old, but I remember they were probably my first models, and I wanted to follow them around. My mother told us very early on that when I am gone, the three of you have one another, and that's it. I remember her saying that to me at some point. I don't remember when, but I remember at 6, they were the center of my world, and I wanted to be like them. I wanted to be like my sister and brother. At 16,
Okay, hear the laughter.
By the time I was 16, I was more independent. I think my sister and brother were both away at college and doing other things, and I attended a high school, Duke Ellington School of the Arts, an amazing, amazing, amazing institution in Washington D.C. And it was really about being independent. At 16, I was catching the bus all the way across town to attend Duke Ellington. And so that gave me access to the city in a very different way. And I realized that everything wasn't about my immediate neighborhood and family, but there was a world beyond, Northeast DC. And so riding the bus in DC, you get to see the neighborhoods, you get to see the communities. And the route that I took, this is again in the 80s, we drove past the Washington of the White House every day. Mm-hmm. You went through Georgetown every day. And so I'm getting access at a very early age to some of the monuments and some of these important places, sites in Washington. Mm-hmm. And so I think that shaped me. Mm-hmm. At Ellington, I was finding my voice, and we were encouraged to express ourselves. You had to audition to get into this high school. And they always let you know that there was always someone else waiting for your spot. And so at 16, I think before I was 16, I wanted to be Leontine Price, the black opera singer, mm-hmm. because my grandmother particularly, watched PBS a lot. And Leontine Price appeared in Aida, the opera. And I saw this black woman singing classical music, and I wanted to do that. And so I studied classical music for a few years. Some of my family members would probably say she was okay, but I studied classical music, but it taught me discipline. Mm-hmm. It taught me about performance and about commitment. And when I was singing with the concert choir in Washington, D.C. at Ellington, Dr. Jackson would take us around the city. So again, at 16, I'm exposed to different spaces in Washington, D.C., mm-hmm. and it's shaping my worldview. It's shaping who I am. But at 16, I wanted to be independent. I wanted to hang out with my friends, but I was curious about the world and now that you've shown me other parts of D.C., what else is out there? And I was awkward. Aren't we all at 16? Yeah. I guess I had a boyfriend at that point. I have no idea where he is now, but I thought that was it. But I'm sure I was awkward, but I decided at one point that I did not want to be Leontine Price, that I wanted to be a writer. And so the Ellington School of the Arts started a literary media and arts program. So I re-auditioned and got accepted into that program within the high school. And for years I'd been writing poems and sharing the work with my family and friends, and they accepted me. And so I changed my perspective. And at 16, I was thinking about college and hanging out and writing. At 16, I was certainly writing a lot. Mm-hmm. And my teachers, I had some of the most amazing teachers at Ellington, in the arts and in the other academic fields, and they certainly tapped my shoulder and told me that I had a gift, and mm-hmm. and that changed my world. It changed my world.
And who did you become at 24?
Oh my goodness.
Oh.
Where was I at 24? I think I was in New Haven at 24. I can't remember. I certainly didn't have it all figured out at mm-hmm. 24. I think I was in graduate school at that time, and I was beginning to do research and, again, continuing to find my voice. I was traveling more because Yale, as an elite institution, they have amazing resources. Resources are great. And they had fellowships that enabled me to travel to different parts of the country to interview women, and that was a critical moment for me. And so again, I have this opportunity to be free, to travel, to experience other people, and to do what I enjoy. And someone else has given me funds to do that, because at 24, clearly, I have none. I don't have an inheritance waiting for me. But at 24, I was just trying to figure out what's my next step. I wasn't married at the time. Many of my friends were, they were starting their careers, but I was in graduate school, or trying to get into my next graduate school. So I
Talk,
certainly didn't have it figured out at that
but
point.
talking about resources, what are some resources in New York you believe that many people are either not aware of or not taking advantage of?
Oh my goodness. Well, as a researcher, I spend a lot of time in libraries and in cultural centers. And, before I moved to New York, I would go to the Schomburg
Hmm.
Center in Harlem. It is like a playground or amusement park for me.
Wow.
It is. And many of my students who've lived in New York all of their lives, they've told me, well, I've never been there. Where is it? Where is it? 135th Street. And it's free.
Free.
It's free. They have programs, they have events, they have archives, they have exhibits. That to me is a resource. In my community in Bed-Stuy, the Weeksville Heritage Center is just opened up or reopened, and the Weeksville community is a free Black community here in New York. Turn of the century, and they have a heritage center, and it reminds people of African descent of our history here in New York, and the valuable contributions we've made to these communities. And for me, that's a resource, because it reminds me that Black people had a history
Yeah.
several years here in New York, and they've contributed to this city, this metropolis, this center of it all. And I think when you think about things like that, it just changes your perspective about the value of people. So resources can certainly change the way we think about ourselves, and that to me is extremely important, particularly as an educator. There's some amazing communities. I've come in contact with, just in so many different communities, individuals who are amazing resources. You're an amazing resources. You're giving
Oh,
me an
thank you.
opportunity to talk to a new audience, and the Network Journal. How? Oh my goodness! What they're doing for women, for women in the professions is truly oh, incredible, incredible. And it's connecting people.
Yeah.
People want to be connected through technology, through our encounters with one another. And so when I look at resources, I don't just think about money, because money is one thing, but human connections are really important. And so individuals like yourself and the staff of the Network Journal, or institutions like the Schomburg or the Weeksville Heritage Center, are so critical for individuals as they think about their place in New York City. So I don't know if I.
When you spoke of networking and connection and being connected, I think of people getting together, whether it's a barbecue, getting together with food and drinks and so on. And it gives me an interesting metaphor for my next question to you.
Okay.
But before I go there, I want to go to the chat room and just read some comments that were there, waiting there for me.
I'm nervous.
A.T.
Okay.
Lott said, so happy to hear from the talented, intelligent, and anointed Dr. Marta Effinger-Crichlow.
Oh, wow.
Bring on the wisdom. And I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce this word correctly. It's spelled R-U-D-Y, this name, R-U-D-Y-A-R-D.
Yeah, that's my husband,
That's
I
your, what,
think.
how do you
Unless
pronounce?
there's another Rudyard out
Oh,
there.
Rudyard. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. You just saved my tongue. And it
Yes.
is so simple to
Rudyard
pronounce.
Kipling,
Rudyard.
his parents who are from Tobago,
Oh,
and they named him after the poet Rudyard Kipling.
I got you.
If the poem, if okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
And Rudyard said, me too, AT lot. And Maria Lewis Bethel said, wonderful. So my next question, it's a statement that you
Okay.
made, and it says, bring more to the table than your appetite.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that, and what is the message you're sending with this statement?
Yeah. Well, I should go back for a moment.
Mhm.
Before coming to New York and teaching at City Tech, I was teaching in Chicago at a university, and then through my graduate training, I was teaching, and I was just watching professors, and I said, okay, where do I fit into all of this? And it was when I arrived at City Tech that I began to really see and figure out who I wanted to be as a teacher and an educator. And that was a process. I didn't have it figured out the first year. And so I wanted to make sure that students at City Tech understood that it was not just about coming into the classroom and just repeating everything I had to say, that they had something valuable to bring to the table through this learning process. And I expected them and encouraged them to do that. And so at some point, I don't know where, when I got the quote, but it's an African proverb, and it said, bring more to the table than your appetite. And I find myself repeating that to students over and over again. And sometimes I get these kind of weird looks. Yeah, I'm like, what is she talking about? Oh, here we go. Maybe I should drop this class. But most of them usually stay. And I say it because I want them to know that when you cross that threshold, it's not just about me standing up in front of you, but you have something to contribute to this learning experience. Once you've done the reading, or you can certainly contribute to the discussion, or your own experiences are valuable, and how do they get placed in these discussions? And so I want students to understand the value of their voices, and how it's important, and why it's important to question one another, to question me, so that we can engage in thoughtful dialogues. And this is lifelong learning. I don't want you to sit up in there and just let me go on for an hour and 15 minutes. That's not exciting. It's exciting to sit in a circle and discuss the readings, or to talk about your confusion, or to talk about how possibly your experiences are have helped you to think about the reading, or something like that. And so I really want to empower students with that quote. I really want them to be empowered by it. So yes, that's what it means to me.
I have this question, and then we'll take a quick break.
Okay.
Why teach? And why are you a professor? And
Okay.
what was the trigger that led you down this path?
Oh goodness. Do I have to answer those all in that order?
No.
No? Okay.
Feel free.
I know that I am certainly here because of a community of people in my life. My grandparents, my mother, my teachers from high school and from college. I have really been blessed. I've had an amazing educational experience, and so I am here because of individuals like Dr. Vernell Lilly, who is a theater director and scholar at the University of Pittsburgh. I am here because of the late Dr. Barbara Sizemore, who was an educator in DC in the 70s and eventually became chair of African American Studies at Pitt, and then became dean of the School of Education at DePaul University. So I am not sitting here because of, just some brilliance that came out of the air. I have been trained and nurtured and loved by people who love to teach formally and informally. And so I think organically it just seemed like that was my calling. And I think teaching is a calling. People think it's easy. It is not. Am I successful every day? Certainly not. But I know that I want to share information and experiences with students to get them to think differently about their lives and about others' lives. And so that's another reason I teach. But I was inspired early on by some amazing teachers, and I think the first teachers I had came from my home and even women from my church. When I was thinking about coming over here, I thought about a woman. Her name was Dorothy Dewberry, and she was a friend of my grandmother's, and they were in a club, a women's club together, and at our church years ago. And she was so kind to me and would sit with me and talk to me about her life and about her experiences. And I knew that she didn't have a formal education, but she was one of the best teachers that I had at an early age. And so teaching can happen in kind of traditional school setting, but teaching also happens in a, when we're walking down the street, or when we experience someone in a kind of a religious setting, or even when we're, having dinner with someone. People teach us things. And so education became really important to me, and I wanted to do research, and I wanted to share my interest in research with students. And so that's why I'm here.
When we come back,
Okay.
the question I have for you, and you can think about it, and as quickly as you can,
Okay.
give us a glimpse in a day. Give us a glimpse in the day of the life of Dr. Marta Effinger-Crichlow as
Okay.
the professor.
As a professor.
Yes, and then Marta just
That's
chilling at home.
okay.
Right?
All
When we
right.
come back.
And my friends and family know that those are two different.
We are back with the lovely Dr. Marta Effinger-Crichlow. Dr. Crichlow, the question I asked you before the break is, give us a glimpse, the day of the life of Dr. Marta Effinger-Crichlow. And yes,
and then Marta.
yes.
Okay. All right. Well, Dr. Effinger-Crichlows' day is really hectic these days because in addition to being a professor, I'm also chair of the department. And something I did not expect at this point, but to whom much is given, much is expected. So I'm not only teaching, but I'm also the head of a department at the college, and in some way one of the faces of the department. And that's really important to me because it gives me different access to students and a place at the table in a different way. So currently, because I'm chair, I teach one class, Black Women in Literature, and spend a lot of time with students who are working and have busy lives. But it's exciting. I need to teach.
You need to teach.
I need to teach. It feeds me. It feeds my spirit. It feeds my mind. It keeps me up to date because, I realized I started at City Tech probably about 10 years ago, and I'm now with a new generation. And at times I learn from my students, and then I come back to my expertise. But this is an exchange. This is an exchange, and so my days are filled with, addressing the needs of faculty members and students, and then there's teaching in there as well. But a lot of it has become administrative, and trying to make sure I listen to the needs of a community at the college. And that's really important to me, particularly when it comes to the students, uh, because some of them have admitted that before coming to college, individuals have not always heard their voices, you know, when they've attended school. And so that's something that's really important to me, whether I'm in the classroom with them or serving as the chair of the department.
On a day at home,
A day at home. Oh, wow.
or
A
just
day
chilling. Anyway, it doesn't have to be at home. But
chilling.
yeah.
That's a word my students use.
Yes.
I know.
That's why I used it
Yeah,
because you
oh,
said
thank
you.
you. But I don't know if they would say that was an up-to-date word. They have some other words. I can't keep up.
I don't try.
They give me words every day, and I was like, what does that mean? What does that mean? So I have this list of words that the students in New York are giving me. But a day at home includes giving attention to my daughter, who has a lot of energy. I don't know what we were doing in the 70s, but these children now, they have lots of play dates. Lots of lots of play dates and activities, and so I can't keep up. So much of my attention is dedicated to her and to her activities, and making sure that despite the fact that I'm a working mother, she knows that I love and adore her, and I have time to play dress up and to be silly and to wear sparkles. I'm surprised I didn't wear sparkles tonight because she watched me get dressed. So, you know, much of my time is dedicated to her and to her needs, and my husband is a essential part of my life, and just trying to make sure that we laugh. It's important to laugh and to not be so serious all the time, and so that's Marta.
Yeah.
And Marta probably has another voice than my friends would say, but but Marta loves intimacy. I may not have a lot of friends, but my grandmother taught me a long time ago, the friends that you do have, they must be of a great quality. And so that's Marta.
I think some of them are in the chat room. I'm going to read their comments in a
Oh,
moment.
they are.
But
Okay.
I want to ask you two quick questions.
Okay.
What is most rewarding about teaching, and what do you think? This might not be a fair question, but
Okay.
I'm going to ask it anyway. What do you think you would be doing if you weren't teaching?
Oh, that's a fair question.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I had a few career opportunities before going into teaching, but
Okay.
I'll start with the most rewarding thing about teaching. And I like to tell stories, so I hope you don't mind. Last Tuesday, I taught an evening class, Black Women in Literature, and I asked the students, we just watched the new film Dark Girls, an amazing documentary, by the way. And we were also talking about Jessie Fawcett's Harlem Renaissance excerpt, Plum Bun, which deals with skin color. And this is a Harlem Renaissance 1930s story. And so then I introduced Dark Girls, which is a contemporary film. And so I decided to ask the students to interview a woman of African descent about her experiences with skin color. And it was a short research exercise for the students. Everyone is expected to go out, interview someone in their lives, their mothers, their grandmothers. They came back, we sat in a circle. As my students say, they threw down, they rocked. They shared stories from women and communities about their experiences with skin color, some beautiful and some so painful. And so it helped me to continue to realize that the issue of skin color is still an issue within communities. People feel like that they have been ignored or marginalized because of it. And so when I watched those students and we went around the circle and everyone got an opportunity, and everyone but one person did it, that was exciting to me. That was wonderful. The fact that they did it.
Yes.
And then they just went around and they shared their stories and the stories they collected, and then they analyzed them. And so moments like that, they've got it. They've got it. And so that is so rewarding for me. And then we can take the next step, because it's really about thinking critically about the world that we live in, and also thinking about how women in your lives are affected by things like skin color or sexism or classism or racism. And then how do we deal with that? Because if you're going to go into something like a field like health and human services, it's not just a profession, but you have to have an understanding of the needs and the desires and the issues faced by the people you're serving. And so that's where I also come in. And so I was just so excited by those students last week. And, those are moments that I treasure forever. Those are moments I treasure forever. And then you had the other question.
What would you be doing if
What
you
would I
were?
be doing? So I told you at one point I was going to be an opera singer, Leontine Price. So I nixed that idea, and then I was going to go into journalism. I went to undergrad to study journalism at first, and I wanted to work for a magazine or a newspaper. And that was what you were doing when you studied journalism back then. You didn't blog. There was no blog
Right.
when I was in undergrad. So I was going to be a journalist. I wanted to work for the Washington Post. When I was in high school, they'd given me a scholarship and to study the summer at a kind of an elite boarding school in New Jersey. And I had this idea that I was going to be a journalist for the Washington Post. So that's what I was going to do.
All right, let me just go into the chat room.
Okay.
So Dr. Christine Thorpe says, "It is such a gift to learn so much about you and from you, Dr. Crichlow. Thank you." Tracy said, "Bring more to the table." In the words of Martha Conway Carter, means don't just listen to the conversation, be prepared to discuss your perspective with clarity and worth.
That is my sister, by the way.
Oh, he's a
And
sister.
she is honoring and recognizing my grandmother, our late grandmother, Martha
Wonderful.
Conway Carter, who was the most amazing woman to ever walk the face of this earth, I
And
believe.
then Mary said, "So proud of Marta." A.T. Lott said, "Feeling inspired as always when in the presence of Marta.
Oh,
Way to acknowledge those who came before you and molded you, the giants in our past. Sissy Moore, Lily, Penny, Carter, Effinger are proud." Diane said, "You make us all here shine all the more brilliant." A.T. Lott, "Dr. Critchlow, can you offer some inspiration or advice to inspiring young writers and teachers out there?" Just two more. We'll get back to that.
okay.
And A.T. Lott said, "Aspiring young writers, not inspiring, or perhaps both." And then Dr. Christine Thorpe said, "Can you tell us about your new book?" And Grace Critchlow said, "Hi, mommy."
Hi, Grace.
So let's do this. Let's
Okay.
take, I think it was A.T. Lott's question.
Okay.
Can you offer some inspiration and or advice to aspiring or inspiring young writers and teachers out there?
Listen.
Listen.
That's the advice I give to young writers and teachers. Listen to the people around you, and especially if you're a writer, and I have my headphones on at times, but some of your best work comes from just observing the world around you when you're walking down the street, where you're in a store. So if you're tuned out and you can't hear those sounds. You can't hear those sounds. So I think listening is really part of it, and to write every day. If you're a young writer, you
Right.
gotta write. You even if it's you don't think it's that great. I have files and files of tissues and pieces of torn paper with thoughts and phrases and lines. And I
And
know I created a few plays because because I heard someone's voice,
yes.
and it developed into something else. So writing and listening, I think, is so critical.
And Dr. Thorpe, can you tell us about your new book?
Okay, I will. So staging migrations comes out of my passion, my obsession with migration. And as I said before, I am the product of the migration to from the South to Washington, D.C. And so I listened to those stories in my family for years. And so I became fascinated by them. And then when I arrived in at college, I continued to explore migration stories, largely thinking about the Great Migration. But then at some point, I became interested in the migration or the movement of black people and particularly black women to the American West. Because often when we think about the American West in, kind of older American films or novels, we think about it as a male space and a space largely for white men and a space for them to conquer. And so for me, I wanted to think about why millions and millions of black people went west. And so in the early or mid 90s, I had the opportunity to work on a play called Flying West by Pearl Cleage, and it explores the ways in which black women settled in a all-black town in Nicodemus, Kansas in the late 1800s. And so when I did the research for that theater, became more interested in why did black women go west? What were they looking for? And so that's the central question I explore in my book. Why did black women go west, and how did they use migration to experience socio-political freedom, emancipation? We all move for different reasons, to find a new way of life, to be recognized, to find a better job, to find better housing. And so for me, I wanted to use theater as a way to think about migration and the migration of black women. And so, for example, I used someone like Ciceretta Jones, who was a black classical singer, but she also became a great theater performer at the turn of the century, and she headed west with a theater company to Denver, Colorado, and toured all around for years. And so I wanted to consider what it was like for this black woman who was a star. She was called Black Patty. What was it like for her to perform in towns like Denver and Seattle? And even if she didn't settle in a place like Denver, what did her presence in this community, this Western community, what did it mean to other blacks, particularly women, when they saw her? And then in one of my later chapters, I explore an amazing, amazing performance artist by the name of Rhodessa Jones. She uses theater to get incarcerated women, largely in the Bay Area, and now she's gone to South Africa, to think about their lives. And so for me, I'm interested in how does a woman get black women who are locked up to think about migration, to think about how to move, to think about how to change their lives once they are possibly not locked up, when they're not locked up. And so Rhodessa Jones, who's this performance artist, she comes from the migrant community. Her parents were migrant farmers, and she was always moving. She was always moving. She was also a dancer and a performance artist. So she understood the complexities of movement. And so she goes to San Francisco. She begins working with women incarcerated. So how do you get someone who is not able to move to think about migration in a place like the West? And so that's really what the book explores.
Who is this book for? Who did you write it for?
It's for those interested in African American studies, certainly those interested in theater and drama and performance. It's also for part of that migration story. And so I want to give people a broader picture of black women in this country. Mm-hmm. Because if we only think about us on one part and being in one part of the country, mm-hmm. then we don't think about the contributions and the problems black women possibly face in another part of the country. And so while it is certainly for those in academia and those interested in the arts, it's also for those anyone interested in migration.
Two questions.
Okay.
It's two parts. How did this process, writing this book,
Oh.
if it did, how did it transform you, and what did you discover about yourself that was surprising?
Wow. Well, for one of the chapters, I traveled to California to interview Black women who went to California to work in the defense industry during World War II. These are Black women who left their homes in places like Texas and Louisiana. Young women. This is in the 1940s. So I would go to places like Berkeley, California, Richmond, California. I would go to their homes and interview these women. At the time, they were in their 80s. Many of them have passed on now. But I would sit with them. And it was interesting because they were willing to answer my questions. Well, why did you come to California? Why did you go to California? What was it like to work as a welder, putting together warships? What was it like working in the defense industry? But they wanted to know, well, why are you out here by yourself? And what inspired you to come talk to me? And so through the process, when I sat down with these women, I learned more about myself. Who was I to think that I could go all the way to another part of the country and go to different communities interviewing these women? That was empowering. And then they were inspired by that. And so it was, it was an exchange. And it taught me that, I could be brave and bold and audacious and meet different and new people and talk to them about their lives. And then I was bold enough to put it in a book. And so that told me that I was stronger and braver than I thought I could ever be.
I want to spend some time in respect of Black women's history, about Black women.
Okay.
And I want to start by asking you, what is special about telling Black women's stories? And next question after that will be, of all the prominent Black women you know, whose story are you most eager to tell?
Okay. Well, unfortunately, Black women haven't always had the stage. People have not always, thought about including Black women's stories in anthologies, and they've not necessarily been interested in putting them on the stage. There's certainly a history of that, but yes, and so I thought there was a void. I thought there was a void in the scholarship, and I wanted to, in my own small way, address the void. Now, certainly, am I the only one? No. I stand on the shoulders of amazing Black feminist scholars and Black female playwrights and Black female historians, certainly. But I wanted to contribute to that work. And so that was one reason I wanted to do this work. And then I also have to think about my personal life. I think about my grandmother and my mother and my aunts. And I wondered, who was going to tell their story? And so I think that's where it started. I am here because of their grace, their love, their, just endurance. And I often tell my students, you can look at your personal life and find inspiration. You don't necessarily have to go to all of these famous people to get inspiration. You just have to pause, as my grandmother would say, be still for a moment, and you will find those people. Their stories aren't necessarily written down, but everyone has a story. And so I think that was another reason I wanted to engage in this kind of work. And so that was really critical for me. And
Whose story?
Whose story? Terms of, okay, I get one that I want to tell. I'm telling the story of Ida B. Wells, but so many people have certainly written about this activist, this anti-lynching crusader. I am certainly not the only one, but I'm just adding my voice to that. Some have written about Rhodessa Jones and her work as a performance artist. Someone I'm really fascinated by right now is Victoria Earl Matthews, this black woman who was enslaved in Georgia, made her way some way to New York City, was an activist and a journalist and a social worker at the turn of the century. And so I am really, really obsessed with her work. She started one of the first Black women's clubs in the country, and she also created this home called the White Rose Mission for Black women in Harlem at the turn of the century. So she would meet them at the docks and have other agents to meet them at the docks because she knew that Black female migrants were being exploited when they were coming to New York City. So she created a home for them in Harlem. With all of her work that she had to undertake, she was thinking about the lives of other Black women coming to New York. And so she, for me, is probably one of the first Black social workers in New York. And so I think I'm fascinated by her story because so many people talk about how Black communities need resources, but we are also resources for others. And so she represents that. So if I can think about one story right now, there are so many that I want to tell, along with the women that I described in my book. She's one of them. And Dr. Christine Thorpe.
Dr. Christine Thorpe.
Yes, she's chair of Health and Human Services at City Tech, and now that we are both chairs of departments, we've created this bond, and it is I have a sisterhood, a friendship, and with this woman, and we're both obsessed with Victoria Earl Matthews, and so she wants to share Victoria Earl Matthews stories with her students in Health and Human Services, and then I want to share her Matthews story with the women in my Black Women in Literature class. And so
there's something that happens to the energy in the room when you're in the presence of powerful women.
Oh, well, thank you.
And I feel qualified to say this because my mother is a powerful matriarch, and I have 6 sisters. So I have some experience with that. And I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you, and I feel that if I don't take this opportunity to ask you certain questions, it would be like being in the desert, finding an oasis, and then postponing drinking some water. So
what a picture.
Yes. I don't want to do that. When I was looking at some of your work, what I noticed among your research interests, things like African American migration narratives, Black feminist theories, African American literature, dramaturgy, and so on. And what jumped out at me was the Black feminist theories. And sometimes I get the feeling that our understanding of it, of the Black feminist movement, can be probably one-dimensional, or we don't have a good understanding.
Certainly.
From your research, and as quickly as you can give this to us, because I would like to bring you back soon. What is the message that, or what are we not understanding, or what don't we know? What have you discovered about the Black feminist movement or theories that might surprise most of us?
Well, we need to understand that Black feminism did not begin in the 1960s, that Black women did not simply copy what white feminists were doing. We can trace Black feminism all the way back to the 1830s, and before that, Sojourner Truth was an abolitionist and a Black feminist. And her speech, Ain't I a Woman, raises that point. Someone like Maria W. Stewart, one of the first, not the first Black woman, but the first political speaker, encouraged Black women in their homes to raise their children to have integrity and to fight for economic independence and to fight for the race and to fight for themselves. And so Maria Stewart said, "O ye daughters of Africa, awake, awake, arise." She was telling Black women in the 1930s to be proactive. Slavery hasn't ended in most parts of the country. It ends in New York on 1827. I'm not a historian, so I may be off with my dates a bit, but Maria Stewart is saying that in the 1830s, and I think the misconception is that black feminism all of a sudden emerged or developed out of thin air in 1960s when there's a legacy of black feminism, and individuals like Beverly Guy Sheftall, and certainly Bell Hooks and others refer to this legacy. And so I think that is one of the misconceptions. Another misconception is that black feminism only happens in academia or in these ivory towers or in privileged spaces. I recognize that my grandmother and mother and aunts were engaged in black feminism every day of their lives, especially as they had to navigate their ways around DC and how they found ways to empower their children and their grandchildren. And so I saw black feminism early on. I didn't know that that's what I was seeing, but that's what I saw. And so black feminism is not just for these privileged individuals. That's another thing. Another thing that I've learned over time is that we can use our daily lives, our personal experiences to think about how people engage in black feminism. So as I was saying, I can look at my grandmother's lived experiences, my grandmother and her dignity, going into certain areas to be a seamstress in Washington, D.C. in the 60s and 70s, and dealing with different communities that didn't see her as valuable, but she carried herself in a certain way, and she found ways to provide for her family. And so for me, that is black feminism. It's some other things in addition to that, but I think she is one of my models. The women in my grandmother's, church clubs years ago, raising money to send people to college, raising money to organize particular drives at the church that would empower young people. That's black feminism. And so I think that we need to rethink the way that we think about feminism. And black feminism for me is not about bashing black men. Mm-hmm. That is not what it is about. It's about, and Alice Walker talks about this. She redefined it, and she talked about a womanist theory. And she said that it is about thinking about the lives of women of color, and also men as well. There's a professor at City Tech, he's in English, Dr. Julian Williams. At one of our programs, he proudly proclaimed that he is a black feminist. And so to have this male educator, scholar stand up before a group of students and to say that he is also a black feminist because he is fighting for the lives of black women through his work, then that is a way that we define it. It's not just, some small clique over here. It is for people to think about how do we empower black women. And when you empower black women, you empower the entire community. And that's the way I see it. I know you asked for a short answer, but
no.
I'm passionate about
Listen,
this.
I am being taught here. And as you were speaking, I remembered or was reflecting on something Rosalind Kilkenny McClement on the show last night said. I grew up in Guyana, and I remember as a child during elections time, the women of the community came out as organizers. I remember them as organizers in the church. I remember my own mother being part of different groups and so on. But I never ever put what I saw into context and until I listened to Rosalind last night, and she said to me something that will stick with me, I believe, forever. She said the women some of whom were not really well educated, but they were the sellers that sold across the street from the schoolyard, some within the schoolyards. They were in the markets. They were sellers. But these were very strong and powerful women.
And they helped to keep the community together.
Exactly. They understood the pulse of the society, and I never ever put it together that way. And what Rosalind did last night was give me the needle to take these different strands of the women's diaspora and weave a new fabric of understanding.
And it's opening up your lens. It's
Yes,
opening up the
yes.
lens. It's understanding that, we need to acknowledge the other stories. And those women, I remember those women, my grandmother's club women, the flower club, those women, they helped me get to college. They prepared, and I remember my brother, my sister, myself, and others. They helped me get to college. Yes, there were other resources that we had access to at that time, but those women, it's like a womb circle around me. You could not fail. You could not fail because they had given
You
you the
dare
tools.
not fear.
Yes, exactly. And their faith was so powerful that, hey, you knew you could go on.
Chat room, 80 lots said fascinating. Can't wait to read the book. Ebony Milner said amazing history, amazing journey. And so I moved to this question.
Okay.
If there's a black woman story that so resonated with you that left an indelible impression in your mind, I, I can you share it with us? I mean, you've shared quite a few.
Yeah.
But is there? I think let's skip that because
Okay.
time is mocking us right now.
All right.
And I want to get to this question about dramaturg.
What do we do?
Yes.
I know.
Talk to us.
Don't worry, everyone asked that question. We're the researchers. I mean, as a dramaturg, I'm hired to do a few things. Sometimes I'm hired to provide the production team, the actors, the directors, the designers with research materials during the rehearsal process. So I sit around the table when they're reading the script and they're trying to understand the history and some of the nuances in the scripts. And so that's part of what I do. You'll send me out to do that legwork, to provide that research material. In some instances, I've designed the lobby displays because that's research. And people don't usually think about these things, especially when you go to smaller theaters. Well, who did that? It didn't just come out of thin air. It's usually, a researcher, someone's doing that. And then in some instances, I've worked with a playwright. If it's a new play and it's still in development, I will sit with them, not as an editor. I don't think a dramaturg can be an editor, but I will sit with a playwright during those developmental period, and I'll ask questions, and I'll hopefully offer some advice or some tools that may help them to get to through that writing process. And then finally, in some instances, I've designed the study guides when teachers bring their students from either high school or elementary school to a theater production. There's usually a study guide for the teachers, and a dramaturg may design that study guide for the teachers so that they can take their students through the theatrical experience. So those are a few things I do, but it all comes back to research and really understanding the play along with the rest of the team, along with the rest of the production artistic team. Yeah.
Do you have anything you can show us about what you do? I know time is upon us,
Okay.
but still, I think you brought some stuff. I
Yeah,
would love to see what you have.
In last year, I worked on Lynn Nottage's play Intimate Apparel. It's set in New York in 1905, and it's a historical drama. But the main character is a black woman who designs intimate apparel for different types of women, different classes and backgrounds in New York. The main character, Esther, she can't read or write, but she manages to find her way to these various communities to sew these amazing garments for women. And so when I worked on the play last year, I was trying to figure out, how does a woman like a character like Esther, who can't read and write. How does she get to the Lower East Side to buy her fabric, to buy the needles, the threads, the beads that she's placing on these garments? And so I discovered this image of the Lower East Side.
Bring it.
Can you
Let
bring
us
it
see.
here?
Bring it up. Let it almost like to your.
Cover me?
Yes.
So this is a picture of Hester Street on the Lower East Side in New York City in 1903, and this is from the National Archives. And so I raise questions like, how does a black woman like Esther navigate her way through the streets, the Lower East Side? And what does she encounter when she does that? And so those are questions I would expect an actor playing that role to think about, would hope that they would think about, because that's going to inform the way you possibly move around the stage and you make certain choices on the stage. And so that was one of the pictures I discovered and forwarded to the group when they were putting together their production of Intimate Apparel. And then I have another picture of since Esther, the main character, is a seamstress. You know, you've got to figure out, well, what does she look like? What does she possibly look like in 1905? What did black women dress like? Well, how did they wear their hair? How did they carry themselves? And so this is another picture from the New York Public
Raise
Library.
it up a little. Yes.
Little,
No,
there.
lower down.
Little lower.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's it. That's perfect.
Now, it's a group of women in a dressmaking class in 1902. And so you get a sense of the clothing, the way that they wear their hair, the way that they pose for a photograph. And so these are some of the things that I give to a theater company, and we did an exhibit at the college in Ohio, and I've now shared that exhibit with City Tech, and so it's on display for Women's History Month in the library at City Tech, and I'm proud of the exhibit because it gives me an opportunity to share my dramaturgical work with my college, with my home, and with the students, because it at times it doesn't make sense if the professional work, if the artistic work cannot be linked with what we're doing with the students. And so yeah, that's what I do. And Intimate Apparel is an amazing play by Lynn Nottage, who is from Brooklyn. She's a Pulitzer Prize winning playwright, and you know, I like sharing different types of stories with students and with communities, not just, you know, a novel or a poem, but theater is really important and near and dear to my heart. And I was nurtured by the Country Repertory Theater in Pittsburgh and by an organization called the Black Theater Network, and they're going to have their conference here in New York in the summer, and they've nurtured me as well. I've been in that organization since I was an undergrad, and now that I'm a teacher, I'm constantly learning from individuals in that organization because they help me to think about theater in this way. How can it serve communities? How can it enable people to think critically about the lives of Black people and particularly Black women? So.
When you talk about research, I don't know why I keep thinking adventure. What still surprises you about you when you embark on these researches?
Oh, well, you know, you it's not easy. I mean, I know we have technology now, and a lot of things we can access them, you know, online, but I love going into the archives. You can smell the old paper, and you have to put on the old gloves. But every time I can't find something that I need, I realize that I'm determined because I will search and search and search. And my editor at the University Press of Colorado knows this, and she's been so patient with me over the past few years. But it makes me realize that I'm a determined person, and I can, if I want to find something, I'll find it. When my grandmother was still alive, just take it to a kind of personal level. When my grandmother is still alive, she talked about wanting to go back home, and she was from Martinsville, Virginia. And when she left Martinsville, she left the headstone of her grandfather, who was an enslaved man, her grandmother, and her mother. And they were all buried in at that time, it was called a colored cemetery somewhere in Martinsville. And she kept talking about for years, I need to find that headstone. I need to find that headstone. And so this was before my husband married me. He came along. I said, I'm finding that headstone. And so I found historian in Martinsville, Virginia, and after months, we located the headstone of my great grandmother, my great great grandfather, and my great grandmother, and we took my grandmother back to her home, and we did a ceremony at the plot, and it was just amazing, and it helped me to understand that yes, I do it for the teaching, but helped me realize why I do what I do, because the joy that we brought to my grandmother finding that headstone, clearing away the weeds, because she left Martinsville years and years ago. And so that was really important to her. And she took along her childhood friend to the headstone when we discovered it. And at that time, I think it was my cousin Mattia, and my sister's two young daughters. So that moment was really critical for them as well, because it's connecting all of us to my grandmother's history. And so you asked me why I do what I do. I certainly do it for my students, and I do it because it brings me great joy. But taking my grandmother back to the headstone of her people is really powerful and gratifying for me. And it will probably be one of the most important moments of my life, because it allows me to see my grandmother in all her glory.
Wonderful. I am going to ask you like some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
So, but because time is a sneak, I can tell you
I
that.
know.
If here we go, rapid fire. If you were given a second chance to choose your career, well, let's you
Okay.
already tell that. Looking back, what will you change about your education or your approach to life? Would you change anything?
Certainly. I mean, I wish I made better choices,
Okay.
before my husband, choose better people to date. Yeah. I don't know. I'm sorry. Did I say that?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did, and yes, you did, and it's recorded.
Yeah. Okay. Forever.
When are you most happy?
When I'm with my daughter and my husband, but my daughter, I wish I could go back for a moment and be 5, because they're happy.
Well, tell us, what do you miss most about being 5, if you can remember?
I miss all of those people who are no longer with us.
Gotcha.
Yes.
And what is most gratifying about being Marta?
Having access to just so much. I'm blessed. Am I the wealthiest woman in the world?
Yes, you are.
Certainly not. But wealth is not just about money. I mean, I've met some amazing people. I've traveled to. I've been to China. To imagine that for myself when I was 16, I couldn't. But the fact that I've been able to do that, or to experience so many different people every single day because of what I do, I mean, I think that's a blessing.
What are you most proud of?
Can I say my daughter?
Sure, you
Is
can
that
say whatever.
selfish?
No,
Yeah, because it's
no
just a
judgment
challenge
here.
to get her here, and that was a journey. And so she is everything to me.
If you could go back in time, what would you tell 15-year-old Marta?
It'll be okay.
Okay,
You'll
okay,
find your way.
okay. Talking about stories. But
Mm-hmm.
let me read these two statements in the chat room before I ask
Okay.
you this question.
All right.
Phil C said, excellent interview.
Oh, great.
Thanks for reminding us that true knowledge and common sense is not only learned in that true knowledge and common sense is not only learned in school books. Some of our wisest elders have master's and doctorate degrees from the unforgivable real world. We appreciate you continuing to spread the flame of knowledge.
Oh, that's very kind.
And
Wow.
and
Okay.
and 80 lot said kuntu with several U's after. I am
Okay.
not going to risk pronouncing that.
Okay.
And finish the sentence. I look forward to Sunday evenings too.
To be still. To be still.
What are you most thankful for?
Breathing.
Okay,
My faith.
your
My
faith.
faith. My faith carries me quite a. My faith carries me everywhere. It's got me here. It's
Just a few more.
okay.
And this one, a few seconds if you can. What story does your mother always tell about you if you were privy to it? What story you think she always tells about you?
Oh, well, she'll always tell that I said I would never ever move to New York City.
You said that?
I said that before I met my husband. I said I would. I lived here for 6 months, and it was a struggle. It was a major, major challenge.
I'm
And
almost tempted to ask the musician
yeah.
to come on this show because I'm curious. Anyway,
Well, let me just say,
yeah,
just a plug for my husband. Hey, I have the mic. Might as well use it.
yeah,
I
go
say that
ahead.
to students all the time. My husband is an amazing steel pan player, and he's a band director and educator. And he learned how to play the pan from my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law is a woman, Verna Crichlow from Tobago. She still plays the pan. She has a band in Pittsburgh, travels around the area playing the steel pan, and she has an amazing story. My husband is a musician because of his mother, because of her endurance and her talent and her gifts. And I remember she tells this story. This will be a story my daughter will tell her grandchildren. I remember she tells the story when she arrived in the United States, no one would, the pan was a man's
Yes.
instrument, and no one would teach her, and she taught herself how to play the pan. And so she brought my husband along, and with his other siblings, and she has a Caribbean Vibe Steel Band in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She is a cancer survivor, and she is still performing in her 70s in Pittsburgh and in the area. And so, hey, if that's not inspiring, I don't know what is. So
What's next for you?
making sure my daughter is secure and happy and whole. Uh, Making sure my family is secure and happy and whole, and making my mother happy. Teaching my students, hopefully using the book to inspire, my book to inspire others. Hopefully, I have another play in my back pocket someplace. But I really want not only my female students, but my male students to understand, and these are not my words, these are the words of Maria Stewart. They are entitled to speak.
Entitled to
You are
speak.
entitled to speak.
I like
You are
that.
entitled to have a place and to take the stage in this world. And even when people have rejected you and humiliated you, you brush yourself off, you get back in the game, and you find a way to make your voice heard. And so I think that is, and I don't have a patent on it. I don't have it all figured out. I'm struggling every day to figure out, how do I make my voice heard when I sit at the table? How do I make choices that will have a positive impact on the students that I encounter? And so, I'm a work in progress. Certainly, I'm a work in progress, and I am humbled. I am humbled. My grandmother used to tell us, be humble. And while I celebrate all of this, I know that I am not here because of just my work. I am the result of so many people struggling and having faith in me and my abilities. So,
If there's one thing about you that most people do not know that might surprise them, what would that be?
my girlfriends, they would say that I am not so serious. I'm not at all. Yes, I'm not so serious, and I love to laugh. I do.
Well, this brings us to the
Yeah.
final question, which I ask all my guests.
Okay.
What makes you laugh out loud?
Being asked to dress up like a fairy when I get home after a long day.
Oh, that is,
And Grace knows what I'm talking about.
that is
Being asked to dance around the house, without being concerned about how silly I look or, how loud we are, that makes me laugh. And
That's
it
real.
reminds me that matters.
Yes, that
Laughter
is real.
matters, and it's good for the soul. And she is our Grace. She Being asked to dress up like a fairy when I get home after a long day.
Oh, that is,
And Grace knows what I'm talking about.
that is
Being asked to dance around the house, without being concerned about how silly I look or, how loud we are, that makes me laugh. And
That's
it
real.
reminds me that matters.
yes. that
Laughter
is real.
matters, and it's good for the soul. And she is our Grace. She is our Grace. So
Any final thoughts?
thank you. That's my, I'm just so honored that you would want me to talk here for an hour and
Well, why not?
it's,
I am humbled.
yeah.
You know.
I feel that, this seat could be taken by my mother, my mother-in-law, my grandmother who is sitting here with us
Yes.
today, and that's what I want to say. I am here because of their silent efforts. Yeah. So
Thank you.
Thank
you
you.
so much.
thank you
for
so
coming.
much. Yeah. Yeah.
And now that you're a woman of CWS, I will be inviting you to come back sometime and share some more amazing
Okay.
stories
I'll
because you
remember
are
that.
such a reservoir of knowledge and
Oh,
information.
you're so kind. That's
But
very
it's the
kind of
truth.
you to say. Thank
It's
you.
the truth.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Okay.
Look forward to having you back. And congratulations again.
All right.
And good luck tomorrow night.
Morning. Is it morning?
Is it morning? Yes.
It's
tomorrow morning. Yes.
luncheon.
Morning.
Yes. I'll be
Yes.
there. I'll be
Yeah.
there. Yes. I'll be there. Morning. Okay, let me look at my calendar. Yes, I'll be there. I'm so excited. So,
Well, good night.
okay.